Chapter 1. The Mystery of Stone Circles. There are very few places on Earth as mysterious as a circle made of standing stones. These massive pieces of rock, known as megaliths, are both a historical and scientific enigma. After all, who in their right mind would spend so much time erecting tons of stone? And why? There's a certain power, an aura of mystery within these megaliths. Even today, that power fuels heated debates among scientists, historians, and the slightly eccentric stone enthusiasts who gather at these sites during every summer and winter solstice to await the first rays of dawn, as if the sunlight might split the earth open and an ancient druid or tree priestess might emerge from within. As with all good mysteries, the real questions are how and why. Why were these stone circles built from the British Isles to continental Europe, and curiously enough, all the way to the Horn of Africa, in different forms and layouts? That remains a topic of fiery debate. It seems the discussion falls neatly into two familiar camps: science versus worship. According to the scientific camp, these structures may have served as astronomical observatories. The layout of circles such as Stonehenge, or the gloomy ring of Brodgar and the stones of Stennis in Orkney, align with surprising precision to the movements of the sun and moon. Think of that feeling when you believe you've discovered a revolutionary mathematical theory, only to find out someone did it centuries before you. Sorry, my friend Pythagoras, but most stone circles were built with astonishing geometric accuracy long before you ever put quill to papyrus. In 2016, Gail Higginbottom from the University of Adelaide, quite a delightful surname, isn't it, Gail? Examined the Callanish stones on the Isle of Lewis and the Stennis stones in northern Scotland. Using 2D and 3D modeling techniques, she confirmed that the stones were perfectly aligned with the cycles of the sun and moon at different times of the year. This pattern was found to repeat across other standing stone sites throughout the UK. About 50% were aligned with the summer solstice, and the other 50% with the winter solstice. Convincing as this argument is, it doesn't entirely disprove the claims of the worship camp. Paganism, after all, is founded on the veneration of the sun and moon. Therefore, the stone circles might not have been mere observatories, but also sacred gathering places where people celebrated and worshiped nature. You can probably picture the scene: hippies dancing naked under the moonlight. Chapter 2. Stone Circles, Death Rituals, and the Construction of Stonehenge. Leaving aside the image of pagans dancing naked under the moonlight, these stone circles were also used as sacred burial grounds. Countless human remains have been found in these areas, and we know that the ashes of the local dead were brought to the centers of the circles for ritual purposes. Of course, there was also a hint of human sacrifice involved, or at least people believed there was. Although historical evidence is patchy at best, there are signs suggesting that purification through blood, ceremonies, and communication with the otherworld rituals were performed here. And when we say the otherworld, we obviously don't mean the Neolithic downtown district. So why did these stubborn pagans take on such a difficult task? Perhaps we'll never know exactly why they did it, but the question of how they managed to do it is at least as fascinating. And the best place to begin unraveling this little riddle is with the world's most iconic example: Stonehenge. The stones of Stonehenge. The stones used by our ancestors to build Stonehenge came in two types: blue stones and the much larger sarsens. The blue stones are smaller, about 2 to 5 tons each, and form the inner circle. The larger sarsens, around 25 tons each, make up the outer ring. The biggest one, known as the heel stone, weighs about 30 tons, roughly equivalent to 4.5 African elephants, or more historically fitting, 4.5 woolly mammoths. On top of these massive vertical stones, were laid horizontal lintel stones. And believe it or not, the builders carved tongue and groove joints, the same kind used in woodworking, to interlock the stones. They also used concave and convex locking mechanisms to keep the upper stones from slipping off. Seeing such fine craftsmanship in a stone structure thousands of years old is truly astonishing. The source and transport of the stones. Getting these stones into place was already a monumental task, but the Neolithic builders made it even harder for themselves by being incredibly picky about where the stones came from. The blue stones were brought from the Preseli Hills in southwest Wales, about 250 kilometers, 155 miles away. The Saracens, on the other hand, came from around Marlborough, roughly 32 kilometers, 20 miles from the site. But think about it. Even 20 miles isn't a short distance, especially for 30-ton blocks. And remember, the monument was built around 3000 BCE, about 500 years before the wheel reached Britain. How were they moved? So how on earth were these massive stones transported? The most widely accepted modern theory suggests that the blue stones were moved by water, floated along the Bristol Channel. That part makes sense, but the overland journey from there and how the stones were finally raised upright is still a bit murky. Archaeologists believe that before the invention of the wheel, stones were moved on log rollers. Logs were laid on the ground, the stone was rolled over them, and the logs at the back were continually brought to the front, essentially forming a primitive conveyor belt. To erect the stones, workers dug pits and used giant wooden A-frames and ropes made of plant fibers to pull them upright. All of this represents an incredible engineering achievement for a society that existed 1,000 years before the discovery of bronze. At that time, they didn't even have metal-tipped spears. They were still in the age of stone-tipped clubs. Chapter 3. Who built Stonehenge? Aliens, giants, and the legends of Merlin. All these explanations sound quite reasonable, yet some people prefer to take a slightly more creative approach to the mystery. So without further ado, presenting the 42 possible builders of Stonehenge Hall of Fame. 1. Aliens. Of course, first place goes to the aliens. According to this theory, extraterrestrials either lifted the stones into the air with their spacecraft or imparted advanced scientific knowledge to primitive humans, helping them build it. But that naturally raises a question. All right, so the aliens taught humans how to lift tons of stone, but not how to generate electricity or invent the wheel? That part's a bit puzzling, isn't it? 2. Giants. In second place, we have the giants. Big stones, big beings. Logically, they must have done it. Case closed. Some translations of the Bible and the Torah mention an ancient race of giants known as the Nephilim. These beings were said to have perished during the Great Flood. But according to certain legends, a few survived and may have built structures like Stonehenge. These claims even appear in one of the earliest written records about Stonehenge, a text called the Brute Chronicle from the 11th century. It tells the story of Brutus of Troy, the mythical founder of Britain, and includes an illustration showing a giant helping to construct Stonehenge. And who stands beside him, you ask? Of course, Merlin. 3. Merlin, the legendary wizard. Yes, that Merlin, the famous sorcerer, stands at the very center of Stonehenge's mythology. According to legend, Merlin joined forces with Uther Pendragon, the father of King Arthur, on a campaign to Ireland. Their goal? To steal a magical stone circle known as the Dance of the Giants. Merlin supposedly used his powers to load the stones onto ships, transport them across the sea, and reassemble them on the plains of Salisbury, England. And thus, Stonehenge was born. But Merlin's architectural resume doesn't end there. He's also linked to the Carnac stones in Brittany, France. Over 2,000 standing stones arranged in mysterious rows. This time, he didn't steal them. He created them with magic. One tale even claims that the stones of Carnac were once a Roman legion that Merlin cursed. turning the soldiers to stone. Even Gandalf would probably tip his hat in respect to that. Of course, any of these stories could be true, and by any, we obviously mean none, because most reasonable people agree that these monuments were built through the collective effort of large groups of humans. After all, a frail, sickly man couldn't possibly have done it alone. Or could he? Maybe there was such a man, and his name was Edward Leedskalnin. Chapter 4, Coral Castle, the story of the man who built a stone fortress. All by himself today, instead of building new stone circles, people are mostly busy putting up ugly apartment complexes and fast food chains. But about a century ago, one man dared to defy that trend. He single-handedly constructed the only megalithic monument of the modern age, Coral Castle, a broken heart and massive stones. A Latvian man named Edward Leedskalnin was left heartbroken when his fiancée, a 16-year-old girl named Agnes, abandoned him on the eve of their wedding. It was the kind of moment that makes you go, yikes. At 28 years old, Edward left for America, settling in Florida, where he began a mysterious project. He worked only at night, never allowing anyone to see him. The neighbors' only clues were the creaking of stone and the clanking of chains echoing through the darkness. Over the years, what emerged was a castle built entirely from the local limestone and coral rock. Leedskalnin moved and positioned stone blocks the size of cars using only primitive hand tools and wooden scaffolding. He used no modern cranes, engines, or machinery whatsoever. What did the locals think? The people of Florida had one collective reaction. What the hell is that crazy Latvian doing out there? Leedskalnin also distributed pamphlets around town, filled with his political and moral musings. In one of them, he wrote, "Schools and churches are making girls cheap. They send them on picnics, pair them with fresh boys, then send them into the woods, parks, and beaches to learn first-degree lovemaking." In short, Edward was an unusual fellow. The mystery, magnetism or miracle. Leedskalnin once contracted tuberculosis, but he later claimed to have cured himself through his mastery of magnetism. Because of that, many believed he had discovered a way to levitate stones using magnetic forces. Some rumors claimed he had learned to manipulate reverse magnetism. Others suggested he possessed a mysterious device he called the perpetual motion holder. And of course, the alien theory popped up again. What if the same aliens who helped build Stonehenge helped Edward too? The answer, however, is simple: no. Number, and definitely no. The truth: engineering genius. Leedskalnin might have been eccentric, but he was also a brilliant engineer. The system he used is still on display today at the Coral Castle Museum. He built a giant tripod out of thick wooden logs, fitted it with pulleys and ropes, and used a block-and-tackle mechanism to lift the stones. With this setup, he was able to move massive blocks entirely on his own. Moreover, the coral and limestone blocks he worked with were much lighter than the stones at Stonehenge, weighing around 15 tons each. Still impressive, of course, but not exactly defying the laws of physics. Even so, his work inspired endless fascination over how a single man could move such gigantic stones. And years later, another man with a similar obsession would rediscover that secret. His name was Wally Wallington. Chapter 5. Wally Wallington and the modern-day Stonehenge Leedskalnin, with his mad genius, had built a stone fortress entirely on his own. But the story doesn't end there, because about 80 years later, another stone-obsessed man appeared in America. Wally Wallington. A retired construction worker and carpenter from Michigan, Wally had turned working with heavy stones into a hobby. Yes, while some people go fishing or build model airplanes, Wally chose to spend his free time moving giant rocks. How do you move a massive stone? All by yourself. One day, while trying to move a large stone block, Wally noticed something remarkable. If he placed a small round pebble under the block, he could rotate it all by himself, almost effortlessly. Encouraged by this discovery, he kept experimenting. He added not one but two small stones underneath, and this time he managed to move the block horizontally. By rocking it gently from side to side, he could move a 1-ton block nearly 100 yards, 91 meters, per hour. In other words, Wally was speeding, though technically he was just rolling. Wooden tracks and the rolling mechanism. But Wally didn't stop there. He built wooden tracks beneath the stones, like makeshift rails. Each protrusion matched the width of the block itself, allowing the stone's rocking motion to transform into a smooth rolling movement. Once a block started moving, its own weight generated momentum. The stone essentially propelled itself forward. Using this simple yet ingenious technique, Wally could move enormous stone blocks with surprising ease, and entirely alone. Lifting, the power of leverage. Then Wally encountered his next challenge. All right, I can move them, but how do I make them stand upright? The answer, once again, was simple: leverage. He built a seesaw-style lever system. By adding counterweights to one side, he could raise massive stones vertically without help. The famous Greek philosopher Archimedes once said, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world." Wally's version was more like, "Give me a stone and I'll move your barn." And he really did. He moved his friend's 30 by 50-foot barn over 900 feet, 274 meters, all by himself, building his own Stonehenge. Eventually, Wally decided to construct his very own modern Stonehenge in his backyard. He transported, erected, and aligned the stones single-handedly. Using nothing but simple principles of physics and mechanical advantage, he demonstrated how ancient builders could have achieved the same feats thousands of years ago. Archaeologists now believe similar methods may indeed have been known and used during the Neolithic period. Still, completing the entire original Stonehenge would have required an unbelievable amount of labor, an estimated 30 million man-hours, meaning thousands of people working together for many years. Epilogue. The stones slowly sink into the earth. Stonehenge still stands today, but it's slowly sinking into the earth. And the person who discovered this curious process might surprise you: Charles Darwin. In 1877, Darwin visited Salisbury Plain and noticed that earthworms lived around the base of the stones. As the worms burrowed through the soil, they displaced the earth, leaving their castings a few feet away. Over time, this caused soil to accumulate around the stones, making them appear as though they were sinking. So yes, in the end, it won't be aliens, giants, or wizards that destroy Stonehenge, but tiny, hard-working worms. Don't worry, though. It'll probably take them a few thousand more years to finish the job, and thus ends the epic tale of humanity's struggle and fascination with stone, a story of science, magic, madness, engineering, and a touch of heartbreak. But one thing is clear: stone circles aren't just history, they're timeless monuments to human creativity and perseverance.